FSU amends their lawsuit against the ACC, and the Big Mountain is here to give you the details.
College football expansion, realignment, and lawsuits are always in the news, so we're back on the Big Mountain to keep you updated.
Hey, it's really nice to have you here on the mountain. I am JY, and this is my good friend Steve. If you're new to the mountain, we welcome you. If you're a subscriber or just a viewer that watches us quite often, we thank you for joining us back. I know we've had a lot of people comment, when are you going to get to the FSU amendment? Well, here we are, getting to the FSU amendment. Took us almost a week to kind of get there. We had other things that we wanted to record and other things in our lives that we had to obviously get done. But hey, here it is. We're going to go over this sucker. There's a lot here, Steve.
Yeah, I'm excited. And like we've talked about many times, for people who want breaking news fast, that's what your ESPN app is for. If you want someone who wants to break the thing down, read into it, get in the details, and just have a discussion together, us two guys and our audience, that's what we're here for. So we're excited.
Yep.
You and I have been talking about this. I read it when it first came out, and so I'm excited to break it down and discuss.
Yeah, and I also want to remind everyone that we're not lawyers, right? We're just laymen, but we like to read over this. We like to give our opinions on it. You've probably heard us say that before. Well, you have heard us say that before if you've heard some of our reaction videos to this stuff. But let's get into it here, Steve. So on January 29th, FSU filed an amendment to their complaint for declaratory judgment against the Atlantic Coast Conference. In their introduction, they added one really key word, and it's the first section we're going to talk about, but they added the words self-dealing. And we're going to get into that here, again, in our first point. In this video, we're going to focus our discussions around the changes in the filing from what was presented originally. If you want to hear our reaction to the original filing, I'll stick a little doodad up here in the corner. You can click on it. You can go check out our channel afterwards. But we're not going to really go over the entire thing here. We're only going to really focus on the changes. The changes here, I'm going to put into kind of three different sections. Section 1 is this whole self-dealing issue, and it talks about former Commissioner Swofford, and we're going to get into that. A lot of words, a lot of kind of pointing the finger at him specifically and his dealings with Raycom. The next section we're going to talk about is the Prestige Network. And quite frankly, when we get to that section, to me, that's where the media stuff is at from a legal standpoint. All the headlines are on this first section, and they called this guy out, and woohoo, look at what they did. Okay, I get it. And probably if you're an FSU person, you love to, have them, dig the dagger into that guy or whatever. Okay. But I really think the second section, when we get into the Prestige Network and some of the issues that went on there, to me, that was the meatier part of this amendment. The last piece we're going to talk about is they actually do give some reaction to and response to the ACC's filing. So let's get into this. First section, it's a new section that they added. It's entitled The 2010 Agreement, Raycom Partnership, and New Withdrawal Penalties. This section is where FSU gives the background of their claim for self-dealing. As I said, in 1997, they go over a little bit of a history lesson here. So I'm going to get a little long-winded, but I kind of have to start at the beginning for this to fully make sense. So in 97, they hired, the ACC hired John Swofford as commissioner, and he held this position until 2021. A single invitation over that time was actually extended to join the conference, and that was to Boston College in 2005. Swofford's son, Chad, who we're going to talk about here a couple times, was actually working at Boston College in the athletic department at that time. In 2007, Chad left Boston College and took a job at Raycom Sports as the director of business development. For decades, Raycom had provided extensive media services to the SEC and ACC. Really, really big media company down there in the Southeast. However, in 2008, ESPN won the media rights to the SEC, and they would now control and manage that production. This was a serious financial setback to Raycom, and they had to cut 20 employees. Over the next 2 years, 80% of Raycom's revenue came from the ACC, and they needed the ACC in order to survive. 2 years later, in 2010, when the media rights came up for bid, Raycom knew they could not compete monetarily with the likes of ESPN, Fox, all the national brands. Supposedly at the time, Swofford made it known to bidders how close the ACC was with Raycom. It is said that when dealing with ESPN, it was noted that the preference of the ACC would be to have ESPN construct a proposal that kept Raycom involved, thus keeping the ACC in business with Raycom, an entity that they had a partnership with since 1986. What came out of this was a sub-licensing agreement with Raycom. Under the ESPN sub-license to Raycom, a package of content in exchange for which Raycom then paid ESPN $50 million a year. This package provided Raycom with more marketing and media rights than it had prior. According to FSU, this partnership with Raycom has cost each ACC member several millions of dollars and continues to depress the value of their media rights. The payment made to Raycom would exceed $3 million per school. In 2010, the ESPN media deal was constructed to account for the Raycom Sports partnership. You're going to hear more about this when I get to the Prestige Network. They're going to come back around. Let's talk about the media rights agreement. FSU, in a footnote, points out, and I want to make this clear to our viewers because I see some comments about this. I think people are a little bit confused. So please, I'm going to both speak to the media rights agreement and to this whole option extension. I'll get to that in a minute, or a few minutes. But FSU points out in their lawsuit that the multimedia agreement expires in 2027 unless ESPN chooses to exercise its unilateral option to extend. More on that option in a little bit. But as of right now, media agreement ends in 2027. I see a lot of people saying 2036. That is not where we're at today. It's 2027. The 2012 ESPN amendment. FSU points out that many articles were written about the 2012 amendment condemning the deal and the dramatically low value that the ACC received. Some of this is traced back to the 2010 agreement and the Raycom partnership, where the ACC was given away increased media rights value. Swofford explained his commitment to Raycom as an emotional one, stating, "It tugged at me." But conspiracy theories began, namely pointing to guess who? His son, Chad, and his employment at Raycom. In 2012, Chad was promoted to the director of new media and business development. Also in this section, FSU tries to take a swing at this liquidated damages issue. So let me just touch real quick on this, and then I'll throw it to you, Steve, in terms of this whole self-dealing issue that they're bringing up. So they take a swing at this liquidated damages. We've talked about that in both of our episodes where we went over some lawyers kind of giving their thoughts on liquidated damages. Both of them brought this up as, a potential way FSU could maybe pierce this ironclad document. So here, FSU points to the fact that the withdrawal penalty was tied to the operating budget. We talked about that in the first episode of this. They state that the effect of tying the withdrawal penalty to the budget increases the penalty without regard to whether the budget increase is reasonable, in regard to whether the resulting penalty is reasonable or in any way approximates the supposed damage to the ACC if a member were to withdraw. So to remind people, and maybe some didn't see those episodes, but this is exactly what the lawyers were saying, that you cannot have a withdrawal fee that's $1 billion. Just pull a number out of the sky. It has to be supported by losses, and FSU is bringing that point up right now. They're saying, okay, yes, we agreed to this severe, what they call now this severe withdrawal penalty, but it's tied to the operating budget. It's not tied to losses of the ACC.
Right.
And they are bringing that up right now, right here in their lawsuit. They didn't do that the first time. It was really interesting to see them do it this time. So I'll stop there. We're going to get into the Prestige Network in the second section. But Steve, what are you thinking about these daggone Swaffords?
So there's two main parts to this. Two major points I have that I think are the most important.
Yes.
So first of all, I mean, a lot of this, like you and I were talking off air before we started, a lot of these, it's a little bit of like soap opera drama, salacious headlines or whatever. So there's a little bit of that, and that's what always gets the attention. Now, when you dig deep into it, though, I think there is some very important strategy behind these points that they're making. So one of the major parts of Florida State's allegations, their lawsuit, is that the ACC failed in their fiduciary responsibilities to their members. Okay, so if they can show any evidence whatsoever, I mean, even just a small inkling that there was some kind of self-dealing where possibly the ACC, their commissioner, maybe even just took into account in a small way that the commissioner's son was at this company, that right there shows that they're not putting their fiduciary, they're not holding their fiduciary responsibilities, because the responsibility is to those institutions and to get them the best possible financial deal that they can. So I think that's a huge thing. If they can, I mean, even a little bit, they can show an inkling of that. I think that's massive. Okay. The other part is, we talked about this all the time. We talked about this with the PAC and now the ACC. A big part of this, we both feel that this is going to end in a settlement. Okay. So how do you get to that point? This is shot and counter shot, move, counter move, to basically trying to put the other team, the other party, in a dangerous position. Okay. So with this, the self-dealing allegations of their former commissioner, what does that do? Well, if we go to discovery and we have emails, privileged communications, all, the ACC is not going to be able to continue to say, hey, these plans and these deals are proprietary information, when now we need to see, is there evidence of self-dealing? That blows that entire thing out of the water. They can't say, oh, that our deal and how we protected ourselves is our own proprietary information. No, we need to see how this deal was constructed. What did you do? Because there could be some kind of self-dealing. How did we come to this point? Why did we do what we do? So that just exposes, now it's not their current commissioner. However, that would be incredibly damaging and just damaging to the reputation of the ACC if they're able to do depositions, transcripts come out, videos come out, showing any kind of evidence or testimony that shows that the commissioner of the ACC was engaging in self-dealing at all. So that's a huge risk for the ACC, which you think would be maybe a motivating factor that would get them to want to settle.
Yes. So
those are the two things I take out of this. The headlines, I mean, it's great, it's fun, salacious headlines, whatever, but what does it really mean to the case? And those are the two things that I think stand out as far as what they mean to the case.
Yeah, I think you nailed it in terms of what it means to the case. I also think, you're going to put a headline out there because they want the clicks.
Yeah.
They're going out. They named Swofford in this, right? Like, that's pretty much every headline that you see. But there's more to this than just that. And I agree with you. That's a piece of this. It's like, throwing 10 darts at the wall. You want one to stick and you win the daggone argument potentially. So, it's one piece of it, but it seemed like it got the vast majority of the headlines. I want to now get into another really interesting section, and I'm going to call it, I'm going to couch it around the Prestige Network and the failings of why it didn't get going when they wanted. But there's other items that I'm going to be throwing in here. They kind of were, I don't want to say they were all over the place. They were trying to, I think, go chronologically, but they threw in some other stuff in here that I found to be really, really interesting. And I just want to say before we go into this, when I read this next section, this is a damning of the ACC and, dare I say, a protection of ESPN. And protection might be a strong word, but there was nothing in here that points the finger at ESPN. You've brought that up before about when is this going to get to ESPN and Disney and whatnot. These next sections that we're going to go over, and you're going to hear me talk about this, they are damning the ACC. And they're actually saying what the ACC told us isn't even what ESPN said.
Okay.
So let's get into this. I found this part to be the best of the whole thing, quite frankly. So a new section here, the ACC and its media consultants dangle a prestige network to its members. So that you're going to hear me say prestige network. It's the ACC network. It's their own network. After Maryland left the ACC, Swofford and media consultant Dean Jordan presented a competitive market analysis. While this was supposed to be to evaluate the existing media industry, FSU claims this was more about securing the prestige network, since the Big Ten and the SEC, well, the Big Ten was already out for years, and the SEC was ready to launch, basically. So remember, this is important because this is the 2013 amendment, and the 2013 amendment was about, supposedly, creating this network, the ACC network, with ESPN. During this time, it is said that Swofford and Jordan, the consultant, pressured members to implement the new severe withdrawal penalty in order to barricade the exits, is the terminology that they used. Meaning, don't let anybody else leave. We got to barricade the door. Nobody else is allowed to go. Also, it is alleged that Swofford and Jordan double-teamed single members of the FSU board in isolated meetings to coerce the members into accepting the grant of rights. Some big words there. Coerce. Big words here. The two drafted a secret pact supposedly for the benefit of the members, but in return offered nothing to the members for their consideration. So again, something that we talked about with the lawyers. What was the consideration of the grant of rights? They're answering this question right now, and I think I botched that a little bit, so I'm going to go back and reread that, because this was big for me. The two drafted, this is Swofford and Dean Jordan, drafted a secret pact supposedly for the benefit of the members, but in return offering nothing for the members for that consideration. In truth, the ACC has never negotiated a new agreement with ESPN. The two said they did not secure the same terms and conditions that SEC had with ESPN. So their goal was to get the same thing that ESPN had. That's what they said they were going to try to do. We're getting what SEC has. They have ESPN. We have ESPN. We're going to get the same deal. That ain't what happened at all. So let's get into the Prestige Network. Within a month after the grant of rights was agreed to, it was exposed that the Prestige Network would be stalled because of, guess who? The Raycom partnership from 2010. Also, Raycom had in turn subleased substantial portions of the media rights to Fox Sports Net, ESPN's primary competitor. It is stated that the only commitment Swofford received from ESPN was to discuss the benefits of launching a network. The 2014 ESPN Media Amended Agreement included non-binding terms for a network, again, non-binding terms for a network, but did partially compensate members for a delayed launch. In 2015 and 2016, that amount was $1 million per member. In 2016, this amount increased to a total of $42 million per year. Once the network was finally launched in 2019, these payments ended. So it was almost like, but we didn't launch it, but you're due some money. So they agreed to these payments until that network was launched. In 2016, June of 2016, members were informed that the launch of the network would be delayed an additional 3 years. It is pointed out that the SEC network with ESPN had no such delay. Due to the delay of the launch, FSU claims that they were induced to execute the amended grant of rights in order to get the network. We talked about that in the very first episode that we had on the filing. ESPN informed the conference that without an extension through 2036, they would not enter into any further media rights agreements with the ACC, and no network would be launched. In doing this amendment, the ACC negotiated no increases in rates with ESPN. This, of course, according to FSU, is a far cry from the significant increases the members were promised. Raycom Sports Partnership receives approximately $82 million a year that goes to third parties, aka the sublease to Fox Sports Net, and that doesn't go to the ACC. That's media rights revenue that's going elsewhere and not to the ACC. They talk about the truth about the ESPN agreement. The terms in 2016's ESPN agreement belie that ESPN ever issued this ultimatum in the first place. Both agreements permit the addition and subtraction of members as long as 15 remain. The grant of rights provision in the 2016 ESPN agreement states, 1, a game had to be played by a conference institution. 2, a game had to be played during the term of the agreement. And 3, ESPN had the right to distribute the game in perpetuity. Once a member withdraws, it ceases to be a conference institution, as in number 1. Again, I'm speaking on behalf of FSU. This is all in their lawsuit. This isn't me, the judge, saying this is what it is. This is what FSU says.
This is their amended filing.
This is what their amended filing says. But again, it ceases to be a conference institution. ESPN did not seek and was not claiming any rights to games played by a non-member after it ceased being a conference institution. The ESPN option to extend. I said we were going to get to this. Here it is. On August 14th, 2021, Commissioner Phillips gave ESPN a 2-year option deadline addition to 2025. That extension was not agreed to by FSU, according to their filing. So again, there's the option to extend for ESPN is now, I think it's February of 2025, and FSU says we did not agree to that. So I'm going to stop there. The last section will be the shortest one, but it's going to be about talking about the ACC's amended lawsuits, and they poke holes at some of what they say. So what are you thinking here with this Prestige Network, Steve?
So I think that there's a couple main areas that really stand out to me. So first of all, I think this is a continuation of Florida State trying to show that the ACC, again, did not live up to their fiduciary responsibilities, okay? And I know I sound like I'm repeating myself, but that's a huge part of the claim from Florida State against the ACC. Now, if they can show communications, if they have numbers and communications, which I'm sure they will try and get some of those communications via, some of them they'll have themselves, but some of them they'll try and get via discovery.
Correct.
If they can, this gives them about, when you play poker, you have a certain number of outs, okay?
Right.
This is just giving them more and more outs, okay? More and more opportunities, and 5, 6, 7, 8, 9 different opportunities to show that the ACC acted in bad faith, used coercion, forced them to accept deals that really gave them nothing. They gave them no consideration whatsoever.
Correct.
Any one of those things can show and prove that the ACC did not live up to their fiduciary responsibilities. So why is that a big deal? Well, in my opinion, I still believe that... So we try and stay away from politics, but I believe that there are certain politicians in Florida, the state of Florida, that would love to make this a state of Florida versus ABC Disney type thing, ABC, ESPN, Disney type thing. But like you mentioned, a lot of this lawsuit is the Florida State lawyers. Their focus is on what the ACC did or didn't do. So when we first started talking about this, I said there was a lot of risk in the state of Florida. Okay, because Florida has certain laws. If they could show that the ACC violated Florida law and that Florida State wasn't able to do this, or if Florida State politicians could get involved, that the risk would be limited. The risk was still high, but it was limited to the state of Florida. Where Florida State could leave, and possibly Miami if they said the whole grant of rights was not enforceable in the state, even though they're not a public institution. For me, these allegations, and if they can back them up, pose a much greater risk to the ACC. If they can show basically a complete lack of fiduciary responsibility or acting in good faith in any of these dealings whatsoever, this threatens the existence of the entire ACC. And right now you have a situation where you have multiple schools in multiple states who are considering, we already know Clemson wants to leave. When you and I dug a little deeper into a North Carolina situation, found some quotes from the chairman of the board at UNC, basically saying like they have to look at the new reality of college football. So, if Florida State can prove any of these things, I said at the beginning I thought the ACC could still survive and maybe just limit the damage. To me, this is an escalation of risk towards the ACC. Now, maybe they're going to have a chance to counteract this, and maybe Florida State can't prove these. Right. We'll see what happens next. But this is just an escalation of that fiduciary responsibility issue, which really pushes the risk outside of the state of Florida to the entire ACC. That's my big takeaway from that section.
I agree. I think both sections are the same. It both, and I know you say you're repeating yourself, but it's what it's leading to. It's leading to fiduciary responsibility in terms of self-dealing, in terms of coercion, in terms of you didn't tell us what ESPN actually said.
That's massive.
It is massive.
And that's such a bigger risk than I really thought this was going to be small ball Florida law. Hey, we can say that this wasn't legal in Florida. That would have been a small thing. This is massive.
Yep, agreed. So let's get to the last section, and that is, and it was a new section in their amendment. It says ACC has no confidentiality agreement or agreement with its members. And they go through a couple different things here, and it's really, again, poking holes at some of the things ACC has put into their filings. So first, FSU, nor ESPN, has been asked to sign any sort of confidentiality or non-disclosure agreement. They state no such agreements exist. The grant of rights does not have any mention to confidentiality or trade secrets. Under Florida law, the grant of rights and all media agreements are subject to the Public Records Act. And as we had an episode on, Attorney General Moody is demanding that these are produced. The ACC files an unprovoked lawsuit against its members. So the last section here, they call this, that they're filing this unprovoked lawsuit against a member. The ACC filing states that the agreements are a trade secret. They bring up the term many times, terms and conditions, that the ACC claims are within the agreement. Given the fact that the ACC filed before FSU, they opened the door to all the terms and conditions in the agreement, which directly contradicts the ACC allegations. Also, according to the ACC Constitution, the ACC was required to give notice and convene a meeting of the board to secure 2/3 of a majority vote in order to initiate any material litigation involving the conference. That did not happen. The ACC self-proclaims that they have this unilateral power to waive sovereign immunity of the states or of state universities without member notice. So I know I just hit on about 4 different things real quickly, but man, they are just pinging everything that we talked about before. Sovereign immunity. They're talking about the terms and conditions and the fact that they filed first. They opened the door for this. They're talking about Moody's asked under your public records, under the Florida, what do they call them? Public Records Act. They're just pinging everything in this, right? So up next is actually on February 16th is the deadline they both agreed to in order to follow up and comment on each other's filings. They said, no, we're not waiting. There's going to be more to it. But they added a whole section and just went wrong, at least in their minds. Wrong. And we're going to put this in our amendment. And the last thing I'm going to say before I turn it over to you, Steve, is just it's really interesting to me as we've gone through this and dug into this. They're actually answering the questions, or at least bringing up the questions that the other lawyers brought up as we did some of our previous episodes. That of liquidated damages, that of consideration for the grant of right. When I read this amendment, I'm like, I think Steve and I wrote
watched
this
our
damn
show.
thing.
Yeah,
No, we're not that good, but I'll tell you what.
I don't know.
It's all in here,
You
Steve.
know, our episodes have been shared a lot on War Chants.
Yeah,
I have a feeling that some of those Tallahassee lawyers are maybe saw the...
It's all in here. You know, shout-outs to Wilhelm. That was his name that did that review back in 2017.
Yeah.
You know, some of this is his. And these attorneys are smart, obviously.
Yes.
But, wow, man, they hit everything. I was... Every time I got to a new section, I went, oh my gosh, they're hitting that. And oh my gosh, they're hitting that. And they hit it all.
Yeah. So for me, you know, sections 1 and 2 were big haymakers. They were throwing haymakers. This last section was, okay, you already hit the guy hard, and now you're just rapid fire jabs. Just
the ref can't get in there quick enough.
Right. Just landing jab after jab. So, you know, it's again, for me, this all comes down to risk to both sides. If you feel like there's going to be a settlement, which both of us agree that there's going to be a settlement, it's about how much risk can they bring to the table against the other party to make them settle. And to me, you know, and we really try not to take sides on this, but I just see so much more risk to the ACC. I mean, we're now getting in territory where they have a risk to their very existence if they keep going along with this and take this to trial. If I'm the ACC, I don't even want to get this to discovery phase where my people have to do depositions, where they're, you know, looking at emails, communications, and all that stuff. I want no part of that. I'm really interested to see what when they go to the official response filings, what they do. But like you said, this is already their response. It's pretty massive. I don't really have much more to say than that because, like we've already covered, the risk to the ACC due to these fiduciary responsibility allegations is massive. If they can prove any of this, to me, the question has moved from it's obvious Florida State's not going to be in the ACC anymore. That's just obvious. And so we talked about the last couple episodes. Can they limit the damage to maybe 1 or 2 other schools? I think as we go along and as Florida State tries to prove these things in their response, we're going to move beyond that conversation of limiting to the damage to the question of, will the ACC even exist, or are they going to go the way of the pack?
Yeah, for sure. You know, I was probably we did a question 2-3 weeks ago about where people sat, and I know we got quite a bit of FSU fans that I think listen to us because we've been doing some of this. And I think it was like 71% that thought FSU was in a stronger position at that time. I was probably a little closer to 50-50, I think. I don't know, maybe a tie, maybe that was a cop-out. I'll tell you what, though, reading this and doing the research that we've been doing here over the past few weeks, I absolutely right now think FSU is they are sitting in the driver's seat. I've also heard that, you know, if this was round 2 with some of the things that they presented, I've heard there's a round 3 that they can get into even more details, even without a discovery phase. Yeah. So, you know, they're clearly, they mean business. We already knew that, but they are not pulling any punches. They are going to go as quick as they can. They want a solution to this because they don't want to be, like you said, they don't want to be there. The quicker they can get out, the better they're going to be in their minds. You know, I see a lot of 26s floating around, but hell, if they can get out sooner than that, they're going to do it. So, anyway, yep.
Yeah, and so what I'll say is, we have a lot of different people that watch these videos, especially when we're talking about the ACC, Florida State. Our main focus is on the Big Ten and the Mountain West, but we look at any of these cases that are going to affect the Big Ten and the Mountain West. And obviously, you know, the Big Ten, we've talked about this, the Big Ten has some, you know, they have some desire. It will benefit them to move down the East Coast, get into a Florida market. A Florida State edition of the Big Ten would be huge for the Big Ten. Mm-hmm. But you and I don't have rooting interest in this. Right. If, you know, to be honest, if I was going to lay out my rooting interest, I would love to go back to where we have a Power 5, you know, 2000s, 2010 college football. Everybody is equal. I love the playoff, you know, a 12-team playoff. If we had the old Power 5 where everything was balanced, everyone was making the same amount of money, we maybe could go back to some of those old school rules that we had that the Supreme Court said no on. And, you know, that would be, if I had what I wanted, that's what we would go back to. But that's just not the realities. Right. And honestly, if a lot of this stuff, if it can be proven that this is true, the ACC has nobody to blame but themselves. Right. They pushed their members into this scenario, a no-win scenario, where they had to make massive concessions and get no considerations for it.
Correct.
So if this whole thing blows up, I don't want to hear whining about Fox, about the Big Ten, about any other companies or whatever. The ACC did this to themselves. If the whole thing blows up, that's just like the PAC eventually. Now, I think the ACC is a little smarter. They're trying to hold on a little tighter than the PAC did. The PAC just looked around and said, whatever. The whole thing fell apart. The ACC is trying to cling a little longer, but the sins of the past may be coming back to haunt them.
Well said. I'm going to leave it at that. Well said, sir. If I got a little tongue-tied, I apologize. I tried to get through this. I'll tell you what, they went from, I think, 35 pages to 55 or 58 pages. Oh, my goodness, if there's a third amendment, it might be 100. It might kill me, Steve.
We're going to do it, though.
We'll do it.
Kills us.
We'll split it into two different episodes at that point. But anyway, hey, we thank you guys for watching. Give us some comments where you're at with this. If there's anything in the amendment that really stuck out to you, preferably not the name Swofford, but something else maybe that stuck out to you. We love the comments. Make sure you give this sucker a like. If you're new to the channel, make sure you give us a subscribe. We're staying on this, even though we are a Big Ten and Mountain West focused. We're going to be staying on this just like we did the PAC, and quite frankly, the Beavs and the Cougs are now part of us as well. So give us a like, give us a subscribe. We'll see you guys next time on the Big Mountain.
Danger is mounting for the ACC.